right, Lindsey, what's on your lens?
We're going to talk more about Minnesota. So what happened to Alex Preddy forces us to confront a very uncomfortable truth. When the official story collapses under the weight of video evidence, accountability becomes the real test of democracy. Alex Preddy was an intensive care nurse at the Minneapolis VA hospital. Born in Illinois, raised in Green Bay, a University of Minnesota graduate, a research scientist who chose nursing, a neighbor, an outdoorsman, and a competitive cyclist, according to friends. According to records, he legally owned a handgun and had a permit to carry in Minnesota. On Saturday, Alex Preddy was holding a phone, recording federal immigration agents when officers escalated the encounter. Now, multiple videos show him pepper sprayed, pulled into the street, pinned onto the ground, and struck. One officer appears to remove a gun from Preddy's waist before shots are fired. 10 shots in less than 5 seconds. Yet within minutes, federal officials labeled him a domestic terrorist, claiming that he intended to, quote, massacre officers. That narrative unraveled almost as quickly as it was issued. Preddy's parents putting it plainly, saying, quote, Alex was a kind-hearted soul who cared deeply for his family and friends, and also the American veterans whom he cared for as an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA hospital. Alex wanted to make a difference in this world. Unfortunately, he will not be with us to see his impact. I do not throw around the term hero lightly. However, his last thought and act was to protect a woman. The problem is that once a person is smeared, even evidence struggles to catch up. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz addressed that directly.
The most powerful people in the world, certainly in this country, President, Vice President, Greg Bovino, Kristi Noem, narrate to you what you were looking at, that this was a domestic terrorist, crazed, running at law enforcement with the intent to kill massive numbers of them, sullying his name within minutes of this event happening, and then closing the crime scene, sweeping away the evidence, defying a court order, and not allowing anyone to look at it.
And then he widened the lens.
I don't care if you are conservative and you are flying a Donald Trump flag, you're a libertarian, don't tread on me, you're a democratic socialist of America. This is an inflection point, America. If we cannot all agree that the smearing of an American citizen and besmirching everything they stood for and asking us not to believe what we saw, I don't know what else to tell you.
Even the Obamas weighed in, noting that federal law enforcement officers do have a tough job, but reminding the country, quote, Americans expect them to carry out their duties in a lawful, accountable way, and to work with, rather than against, state and local officials to ensure public safety. That's not what we're seeing in Minnesota. They criticize federal agents for, quote, acting with impunity and engaging in tactics that seem to designed to intimidate, harass, provoke, and endanger the residents of an American city. For Black Americans, the story feels painfully familiar. Aggressive tactics in moments that demand de-escalation, narratives written before facts, and humanity treated as optional. Alex Preddy deserved what every person deserves: restraint, truth, and dignity. If we can't agree on that, regardless of politics, then the problem is bigger than one tragedy. It's about who gets believed, who gets protected, and whether evidence still matters in America.
Well, as I said on my radar, I too am pretty furious about what the administration is saying about this incident, prejudging it, describing his motivations, Alex Preddy, that he was a domestic terrorist or that he intended to do harm to law enforcement when there's no evidence of that. Him just carrying a gun is not evidence of that. I must say that over and over again. You have the right to carry a gun. It's a concealed carry state. You can exercise the Second Amendment or the First Amendment at the same time. Even in that video, I don't really, I guess he's resisting. It's hard for me to tell exactly what's going on. They approach him after he tries to help one of the protesters. Maybe he's resisting. I can't quite tell, but he does. Who knows exactly what the circumstances are? It's hard to say from, there's a bunch of people, but I can say pretty confidently they've not given me any reason to think he was there to kill law enforcement agents. So I am upset about that. Look, I think the most rational or reasonable things Republicans can say in response is that this is a mess that results from, I've said it before, Democratic-controlled areas not enforcing immigration laws. Immigration is the purview of the federal government. If they would do that, you wouldn't need to send law enforcement into these areas, and I think that's true. At the same time, the optics of this are, I think, quite bad, and only very committed, very partisan supporters of the mass deportation Stephen Miller scheme seem still on board. A lot of people thought this was going to be about deporting criminals, not just like everyone at any cost, at the cost to American citizens being harassed and killed,
right,
is getting to be a little much. And I think there's some indication Trump gets that. I just saw him say on True Social that he was sending in Tom Homan, and they're going to be rethinking what they're doing. In my view, Tom Homan is has demonstrated himself to be a more professional law enforcement personality than, unfortunately, Kristi Noem.
It's surprising thinking about how adamant Tom Homan has been about immigration enforcement. He's been the one on the Sunday show saying, let's let this play out, the investigation play out fully. And I thought that that's the appropriate response.
And he wants to do a major crackdown on illegal immigrants who have committed other crimes. And you can do that. These two strategies are at odds, because there are plenty of illegal immigrants who've committed crimes who can be arrested, detained, deported in areas of the country that do participate with law enforcement, in red states. So it would be easier, where you need to commit fewer resources. You can do that, and they want you to do that. But because the path has been chosen to do these very showy standoff encounters in areas where there is not support from the local authorities, you're seeing these kinds of clashes. If it is to break the will to resist or whatever that Democrats are feeling, fine, but this is what it looks like, and I think people are going to lose resolve. Whereas if you want to do a lot of good in terms of the deporting of criminal illegal aliens, Homan's strategy was better and doesn't necessitate these kinds of incidents.
I think that the whole country should look at this and say, why is the burden on the victim to prove his humanity? When you have the most powerful people in the country claiming and deteriorating somebody's legacy, we find ourselves, and why I compared it to the experience of Black Americans, is that we find ourselves trying to make somebody a martyr that could have just been a civilian that didn't deserve to die. And so there's this over-explaining, trying to repair the character that was assassinated prematurely by federal officials sometimes or otherwise. And really, that's not the way forward. And we've learned that too many times as people of color, watching instances be prejudged and then we're overcorrecting. It doesn't matter if Freddie was a stand-up man or not. It matters, did he deserve to die? Did his actions need to lead to death? And is this the immigration policy that we'd like to move forward?
No one deserves to die. It matters, was the officer who shot him, was that a reasonable course of action in the moment? Did that officer reasonably fear for his life? I've said in the Renee Good case that it should be investigated. It's not being investigated. I'm not happy about that. It might be the case that the officer's actions, he thought the car was coming at him, and those actions were reasonable. I think that's perfectly plausible. Maybe it's plausible in this case too. It seems less likely to me that this was a correct. Obviously, we hear maybe he thought the gun had gone off. Maybe it was accidentally gone off. Maybe he thought it was.
It's just too much benefit of the doubt to be losing lives over it, though. That's what I mean. You're saying if he was scared for his life,
but
maybe perhaps people aren't trained enough
to
deal with these circumstances. Well, the person that died should really get the benefit of the doubt here. Someone's lost a life in a family, and immediately their character is assassinated.
I was just saying whether you're going to prosecute someone for for manslaughter or whatever, the burden is on the prosecutors to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt it was not a reasonable course of action. Lindsey, what's in your lens today?
Yeah, so I'm talking about this. When people say this is starting to feel coordinated, they're not being dramatic. They're paying attention. After Alex Preddy was shot and killed by federal immigration personnel in Minneapolis over the weekend, naturally, people turned to social media to air their grievances and thoughts. I mean, it is the second time this month an American citizen has died during a federal immigration operation in that city. Some folks took specifically to TikTok to talk about what happened, and many say their posts were suddenly quiet. Not just a few people either. TikTok users across the country reported that videos mentioning the shooting, ICE or federal enforcement stalled, showed 0 views, or were labeled, quote, ineligible for recommendation. Singer Billie Eilish even posted on Instagram, quote, TikTok is silencing people, by the way, after her brother's video about Preddy's death reached a fraction of his usual audience. Here's what he said in that video.
You've spent 30 years straight telling us that children have to die so that we're allowed to legally carry weapons everywhere in the United States. This guy was being beaten to a pulp on the ground. He didn't draw his weapon.
That video had about 42,000 views, and most of his others easily cleared 10 times that number. That's one example, but if you go on X, you'll see a variety of people with tens of thousands of followers noting that their ICE-related videos got little to no reach compared to their usual audience. Now, TikTok says this was not censorship. The company points out that there were outages at a U.S. data center and says it's been working to restore the service. But here's the problem. This didn't happen in a vacuum. These complaints exploded just days after TikTok finalized a deal to spin off its U.S. business to new investors to avoid a ban in the U.S., a deal that puts the algorithm under the control of a consortium of U.S. companies that include Trump allies like Oracle. Oracle's executive chairman, Larry Ellison, has also assembled a media empire increasingly friendly to Donald Trump. Why does that all matter? Well, because when content critical of federal power, immigration enforcement, or the administration starts disappearing, even temporarily, trust collapses, especially with a younger audience base that already feels watched, throttled, and talked down to. Steve Vladek, a Georgetown law professor, said a video he posted criticizing the Department of Homeland Security was, quote, under review for 9 hours and couldn't be shared still at the time that I wrote this lens. Senator Chris Murphy summed up the stakes bluntly on X, writing, quote, I know it's hard to track all the threats to democracy that there are right now, but this is at the top of the list. And then there's this from Bernie Sanders, who put the bigger picture into one sentence, saying, quote, thanks to Trump, right-wing multi-billionaire Larry Ellison will now control the TikTok algorithm, along with CBS, MTV, the Free Press, BET, CMT, Simon & Schuster, Nickelodeon, Paramount Plus, Pluto TV, and more. This is what oligarchy looks like. Now, whether this was a technical failure, algorithmic chaos, or something more intentional, the damage is the same. People don't trust what they're seeing or not seeing. And in a moment when federal power, immigration enforcement, and democratic norms are already under strain, you have to admit that this is scary.
Yeah, this is an interesting subject. I became aware of this yesterday as well. I'm not active on TikTok, but I saw complaints from people I know who do use the service about throttling of political content. I think it's too soon to know exactly what's going on, if this is just kinks being worked out, but I don't want to be naive. It might be, you're right, I am also concerned that it is a conscious effort by the new owners to crack down on political content. I think that would be deeply bad and also an indictment of, unfortunately, of like America, because we were worried that the Chinese were censoring it, so we took it over, and now we're going to censor it even harder. Because make no mistake, the Chinese did do some censorship on the platform. I remember when you had to refer to COVID, to the coronavirus, as like people found all these ways. Because if you said COVID, they would nuke the post. So you had to say, like, people would say the Panda Express instead of the pandemic. They said Backstreet Boys reunion tour.
Oh, man.
Isn't that funny stuff? I mean, you say unalive instead of suicide if you're talking about suicide on the platform.
And I noticed people will put like stars in their text that seems like it will raise alarms on all social media platforms.
Yeah. But anyway, certainly they should not just nuke political content that the administration or conservatives or whoever, pro-Israel people, don't want discussed. That would be very bad. I don't know that that's what's happening, but I'm certainly not confident that, it was just a mistake. I think, one thing is people will use terms to get around those kinds of filters, or they're just all going to migrate to a different social media site. But this underscores that I didn't think TikTok was enough of a national security issue to justify the federal government doing anything in the first place. If we're going to aggressively force censorship on our own platforms anyway, as the Biden administration did during the pandemic to X and Facebook and YouTube, are we really so much better than this? One of the only cases where I'll make this moral equivalence. Be like, are we even any better than the foreign communist censors if we're doing that too? So this is not good at all.
I just feel like once you have several examples, people should call to question what's going on over at TikTok. I mean, there were people, and I was like, how many is it? Because I know that there's a lot of people that you don't like that were tweeting about how their accounts were shunned,
right,
like Keith Olbermann, and exactly. And there is some of that, right? There is some of that.
But sometimes
on the
like,
same
sorry,
topic,
this one didn't pop.
Right, across the board on the same topic, it seems like we should be concerned. And then also, if you look at, and I try to be neutral in regards to Bari Weiss because of her independent media venture and how successful it was and what I think young minds can do for a company. At the same time, we do know that there's been noticeable changes at CBS. I don't know. I feel like it's naive to say that they're not intentional. And so when you know the same group answers to the same owner, Larry Ellison, then you have to be concerned to say, well, if there's changes that immediately happen within months of the takeover of CBS and Paramount, well, there possibly will be changes, even though he's one of many owners now of TikTok. And if this happened on the heels of their takeover, well, naturally people are going to be concerned, especially when you have somebody like one of the most famous celebrities right now, Billie Eilish, who often supports her brother's post that's saying, how do we reach 42,000? Like when we look at the numbers and his last posts are hitting millions, 10 times that, 420,000, then how do we get here?
Yeah, again, hard to know. Could be because of
you have so much grace here. You have so much grace here.
I don't know. They make changes to algorithms, and my social X is really the only one I'm active on in terms of posting political content, and I go through periods where I'm like, am I being suppressed? It's way down. Nobody's seeing what I'm saying. Then I'll go through periods where it's way up again. It's opaque. We don't know exactly what causes it. And yes, sometimes they're nuking things they don't want you to read. Sometimes it's it's being gamed in some reason. I was describing how I think foreign accounts are gaming X's algorithm to some extent. Nick Fuentes is getting gets more likes per second than Elon Musk can even get. And then you're looking and it's all from people who live in Pakistan and it's some bot farm thing. They should really watch out for that. With TikTok, I don't know. I know TikTok much less well because I'm not active on it.
And also the bigger issue is as you continue to censor people for the way that we can still get out video, which is like on YouTube or other apps that are censoring in different kind of ways. If they're all finding their own ways to censor because it's their choice, people are going to rebel anyway and find the content. There's like no way to stop endless content now. We saw that happen with with Israel and Gaza war, right? The content came out about what was happening overseas, which made the public opinion
out on TikTok.
Exactly. But either way, also it was, even though it was to me suppressed on Instagram, it seemed that a lot of accounts.
Right, it makes its way to Instagram.
It makes its way.
Right,
and then it makes
see
its way.
TikTok's content mostly on Instagram.
Exactly. So that's what I mean. You can't. Like it's already out of the bottle. It's already spilled milk. There's nothing that we can do to contain all content, no matter how much you censor it. So I think
that's why I always say these concerns about media consolidation are overblown for exactly that reason.
Well, I think when you still have older people that still do watch traditional television and they're a large voting bloc and they're persuaded by somebody trying to change what was the standard news, like somewhere like CBS, well, that's problematic.
Right. Old people have way
old
too
people
much
do.
power
They do
over
vote.
our
Young people
system,
should get out and vote.
And they're confiscating all of our wealth. Lindsey, what is in your lens today?
Lots to discuss. So Bari Weiss is walking into CBS News. I mean, we knew it was never going to be a quiet walk-in. And frankly, that's not a bad thing. She's built something real on her own. The free press didn't come from a legacy institution or a corporate safety net. It came from audience trust, curiosity, and a willingness to challenge orthodoxies. As a woman who's done that independently, that part of her resume is genuinely impressive to me. And CBS News, like every legacy newsroom, does need to evolve. Weiss acknowledged that head on at her first all-staff meeting, according to the New York Times. She told employees this week, quote, "We are not producing a product enough people want." That's blunt, but it's not wrong. Broadcast news is losing relevance a bit, reach, and trust. Ignoring that reality would be malpractice. Where the tension comes in is the execution. Because rethinking distribution, expanding voices, and meeting audiences where they are at should never come at the expense of a journalistic spine. And that's the burden Weiss now carries. Not because of who she is, but because of the moment that CBS is in. She promised to, quote, marry the journalistic principles that will never change, seeking the truth, serving the public, and ferociously guarding our independence with the tools that are constantly are. Independence is the whole ball game, especially when CBS's new ownership settled a $16 million defamation case with President Trump shortly before federal approval of the sale, especially when critics are watching for signs of softness, deference, or access-driven coverage. That's why early stumbles have landed so hard for Barry, pulling a 60-minute segment on migrant detention abuses after it had only been promoted everywhere, only for it to largely air unchanged, raised legitimate questions. Weiss admitted she mishandled the logistics, saying she was new to TV and, quote, nothing of that kind is ever going to happen again. Fair, rookie mistake. But it can't become a pattern. Because optics matter. When a January 6th anniversary gets a 15-second he said, she said mention, while CBS's own justice correspondent does a deep dive that day on the BBC instead, that's not innovation, that's avoidance. When an anchor closes a segment with this,
Marco Rubio, we salute you. You're the ultimate Florida man.
That's not exactly broadening appeal, that's blurring lines. None of this means Barry Weiss has to become what her critics fear or abandon the disruption she was hired to bring, but it does mean proving consistently that she isn't a proxy for ownership interests, political pressure, or access journalism. That stories critical of power won't be slowed, softened, or sidelined. CBS News became CBS News by earning trust over time, not chasing relevance overnight. Now, reinvention is necessary. Compromise on core principles is not. If Weiss gets this right, she can help build a newsroom that's both modern and formidable. If she doesn't, no amount of startup language will save the credibility that made CBS even matter in the first place.
You are really upset still about that Marco Rubio line.
I am. We salute
Not
you.
let
Oh my
that go.
God. We salute you.
But I've said it.
It was a slew. I named the other things.
cut
That was
that.
the icing on the cake. I named the coverage, he said, she said, of January 6th, the cutting of the story that aired largely unchanged, even though she was accusing these tenured producers of not having reached out to the White House and federal administration officials, and they did.
I've written for Barry Weiss before. She is an intense editor. You have no idea how intense. There's a lot of people who don't want to write for her because she is so meticulous at what she does. She demands rewrites, even when you think you've given her exactly what she wants. She wants it done over again and again and again. People quit in frustration because she's that thorough. So I was not surprised in the least bit that she ordered some, even at the last minute's never good, but that she ordered another look at that segment, which aired and was fine.
And nothing really changed. So why did she do that? That's what I mean.
Because she's an editor.
Flexing a muscle because...
No, because she's a detail-oriented, intense editor. She's good at that. So I don't have any problems with how that went down. I don't have any problems with they just announced a slew of like 20 new contributors to CBS.
A lot of them came from her site, The Free Press.
A lot of them did. They're all people who are great. I don't agree with all of them on everything, obviously, but they're all interesting thinkers. They're people of the center left, the center right. Really, her orientation is kind of very centrist, which is going to be interesting to see if that can thrive in a media ecosystem where I think strongly held opinions can prevail. Can she, make a business model out of smart centrism? But the Free Press proved that there is a model for that, and I think CBS used to position itself that way, but has recently fallen. You talked about a brand having trust. They have squandered trust. They
Because they cut out a pause in Kamala's interview?
Yes.
Like, that's why for you, for real? That's what you're going with?
minutes,
I mean,
all
you're talking
sorts of
about
crazy
me and
stuff.
this, we salute you, Marco Rubio, but this pause in Kamala's interview really changed the game for you. I mean, the fact that she took a breath while she thought about what she wanted to say.
Okay. The thing that 60 Minutes has done in the last several years that was most offensive to me was their segment on German speech police, where the reporter is just sitting there like, oh my God, you can take people's laptops? You can shut them off their social media accounts? Like lusting after the censorship power that the German authorities employ without any consideration of how, one, evil that is, how that would conflict with our cherished First Amendment rights. That was revealing in an ideological way. And there's been a lot of that. The tech coverage is horrific, prone to moral panic. So I'm excited to see, and the people brought in this new roster, these are people who I think think through tech issues in a more, and speech-related issues and social media issues in a more holistic way, in a way more in keeping with our American traditions, not some European bureaucrats.
And she also told folks that if it's not the place for you, that they can leave. She did say that during the meeting. And I think that there has to be like a level of respect for the people that have been doing this, that are there even before she was born. And that doesn't mean that the grandparents need to run the newsroom. It means like you got to respect people's experience sometimes, and that they can bring, yes, they can bring information to you. Like, so I lead a production company. I'm not the best editor in the world. I'm going to respect the editor's suggestions. I make the call, but I'm not just going to tell him what to do when he's been doing this for 20 years.
Of course.
So that's what I'm saying. There are people there that feel like condescended by her presence. And so I think this meeting might have been and this has come from reports that have come out. I think a meeting is a first step to actually acknowledge that you see and hear the people that have been working so hard.
This isn't about the production. Yes, of course, the production team knows more about
This is about the news team, the researchers,
this is about
the reporters.
The ideological content, the perspective. And there, she should just basically wholesale disregard the people who represent the old guard and the perspective. She's changing the perspective. The perspective doesn't work for the business model. The perspective doesn't work for the new owners. So it's going to be different.
Well, this is a really expensive bet. Like I said, I'm happy for Bari Weiss. I'm not one of those people that has an intense, extreme feeling one way or the other. I'm happy for her as a businesswoman, but also think that she could really drop the ball here if she doesn't handle this right. And I think that it's a fine line to walk because she's a test case on a high, expensive level to see as they start to open the doors for more people that understand innovation and young audiences in these companies that need to open the doors, but not if it becomes a disaster over there. They're going to look and say, oh no, we're still going to cater to like 70 plus on TV and not make any adjustments.
Yeah, well, that speaks to the television model in decline anyway. I mean, you got to pivot to, right, will people just turn on their TV? They have it on. They leave it on all night. That was a business model that you sell ads. Now people watch online and on. I say this all the time. You have to consciously choose the next video. You have to have all individual pieces of content be compelling in their own right. It's more perspective driven. It's more personality driven. It's driven by individuals rather than brands. I think that's the biggest challenge she faces, is that just reviving a brand is a tough thing to do. Why even bother? She started something new, the Free Press. You start something new. You don't try to fix something because the brand itself doesn't have the value it used to have. Why try to save it instead of just creating something new? I know she's been tasked with saving it, so she'll give it her best effort, but I think it's a very fraught proposition to revive a brand in the internet age, because people can just choose a new thing.
Because TV came, radio didn't go away, so I disagree, but we'll see what happens.
Well, it's going away now. Lindsey, you're up. What's in your lens today?
Let's get into it. So Democrats have been getting hammered with the same question for months. Where's your plan? Well, now they're putting it on paper. And it's really not some abstract academic wish list. It's 3 very specific demands tied to Homeland Security funding, coming as the clock ticks towards a shutdown deadline after federal agents shot and killed Alex Preddy in Minneapolis last weekend. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says his caucus is united around 3 main objectives. And when you listen to what they are, the bigger point is simple. Immigration enforcement can exist, but it can't operate like a system with no rules, no transparency, and no accountability.
First, we want to end roving patrols. We need to tighten the rules governing the use of warrants and require ICE's coordination with state and local law enforcement. Second, we want to enforce accountability. There needs to be a uniform code of conduct and accountability. Federal agents should be held to the same use of force policies that apply to state and local law enforcement and be held accountable when they violate these rules, including we need independent investigations to help enforce accountability.
I think that's common sense, because roving patrols without clear rules don't just create fear. They create mistakes, as we've seen in Minneapolis. They create confrontations, and they create the kind of murky, confusing encounters where nobody knows who's in charge, what authority is being used, or what rights people actually have in certain moments. And that's where the second point matters: a universal code of conduct and independent investigations. If local police departments can be required to follow use of force policies, federal agents shouldn't get a special carve-out. Accountability isn't anti-law enforcement. It's what makes law enforcement legitimate. Then there's the third demand, and honestly, this one shouldn't even be controversial.
We want masks off, body cameras on. Federal agents must be prohibited from wearing masks. They must be required to use body cameras, and they also always have to carry proper identification.
Masks off, body cameras on, proper identification. That's really not about politics. It's about basic transparency. Body cameras have been used across the country because they protect the public and they protect officers when accusations fly. And if someone is exercising government power, stopping you, detaining you, entering your home, you should be able to see their face and know who they are. And the public is clearly uneasy with how far things are going right now. A Reuters Ipsos poll just came out, found that some 58% of respondents said ICE agents have gone, quote, too far in their crackdown. It's not a fringe opinion, that's the majority. So when people say Democrats don't have a plan, here it is. Guardrails, accountability, and transparency. Because enforcing immigration law should never mean abandoning the standards that make this country a democracy in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I, for the most part, agree with those policies. I saw Rand Paul say similar things on TV yesterday, say that, like, look, what happens with local law enforcement, if there's an officer-involved shooting, even if it is ruled perfectly justified, you know, usually they have a period where they're on desk duty and there's an investigation. Right. And that can be obnoxious for them, but it's just kind of the standard operating procedures. So national law enforcement it shouldn't be any different. And yeah, I totally agree with him. He said there should be an investigation.
So if we get to Friday and the government shuts down and the Democrats have laid out specific things they'd like, if we are not in agreement about that, we know it's because the other side of the aisle said we're not going for this.
Well, some of those things aren't even controversial. Don't we all agree that we want body cameras? I don't think anyone is saying I want less video footage of these encounters. I don't think anyone thinks that. Now we're arguing about what the video footage shows, but we're glad we have it.
And if we had body camera,
everybody's glad they have it.
Right. If we had body camera every single time, then this would really
Some of these aren't body. Right. With the video,
some of them aren't body cameras.
Some of it is from spectators.
We'd know almost like we'd have matched that with the spectators, and they would have even more of a firm case about any argument.
Always have body camera footage.
And I think that the impartial, independent investigations, they should include both federal and local law enforcement. I mean, I don't think that's a crazy thing. People say they can't believe the federal government right now. People say that Fry and Walz are adding to the chaos and they can't listen to them right now. Okay,
well, they are.
So then let an independent entity jump in, and then both people can be involved, and they independently can tell us what happened. I think that that's a fair thing. And also the masks off. Like, why are we hiding ICE agents in the way that we're not hiding police officers? Like, you can do your job and take your mask off. I mean, in no place.
Well, the reason for that, from the conservative perspective, is that local police doing their jobs is not particularly controversial. The work ICE is doing is controversial, and that if their identities were known, they would be doxxed, harassed. They would be, screaming liberals, some of whom I guess are being trained to actually have clashes with law enforcement. Alex Preddy, now we know, did kick out the taillight of a police vehicle.
It doesn't give ICE the right to kill him.
People, not saying it does. Absolutely does not. But you'd have people like that showing up at ICE officers' homes and maybe, smashing their mailboxes with baseball bats or, throwing bricks through their windows or something like that. That's what you'd have if they were not masked. That's the argument. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's the argument.
I accept the argument. I just think we need to hear very vocally, not just Rand Paul, who always, tries to play the middle or be neutral. We need to hear more Republicans.
Well, he wouldn't say it's playing the middle. He would say it's applying his limited government
doing
view
what government
evenly.
is asked to do, right?
Yeah.
Negotiate across the aisle. We need to hear more Republicans come to the table and say, well, if it's not these three things, what are your three things? I don't want silence and then another shutdown and then a blame game. Like we see what's happening with the president and Fry, who can't get it together, when Holman and Walz seem like they have it together. We're going to try to figure out the next steps. Fry and the president are still arguing like children. We don't want the government to shut down and then see people arguing on X. That is not acceptable, once again, 1 month after the last shutdown just ended.
Soon enough, Trump will be negotiating, I guess, with Amy Klobuchar, who has decided to run for governor after all.
And I think that's a good move for her.
Yeah, I guess it's a good move for her. I guess you wield, because I was wondering, like, why would she want to do that job? But I guess you get to do actual things, whereas in the Senate, in the minority, you just I don't know, you just go on TV.
The spotlight is on.
Although I thought maybe she was in line for a higher up leadership role in the Senate eventually.
We know that she wanted to be president. That didn't really work out, but her ambitions have always been to be
This
on a
close to
national
being
stage.
vice president, maybe.
Maybe, and her ambitions have always been on a national stage, and so I think the fact that Minnesota and Minneapolis is in the spotlight in the way that it is, she has an opportunity to say the same way. And we're going to talk about Josh Shapiro in a little bit. I can distance myself from the last person in this position, but I can also lead it a different way, and she can be that perhaps moderate Democratic voice that's also saying, yeah, fraud's not acceptable. Anybody who commits it should be arrested, and no
I
perspective
don't know that
about
she's
that.
that moderate, but
But I think that you have to acknowledge how much fraud happened in the state. You can't dismiss it just because you don't like the
Right.
YouTube journalist that went there. Whether you believe him or not, there's other accounts that have been fully proven of the fraud. And so I think she needs to address these things and also hopefully get in the conversation now about what immigration enforcement looks like in her state. That's this is a big job to take on it while the spotlight is on Minnesota. But I think that she can do it. I think that she has a level head.
I don't know about any of that, but I find her less grating and obnoxious than I find Tim Walz. So
You cannot find Tim Walz any more obnoxious than you
I
find our
really-
president. You can't.
Oh,
That's
I
not
do,
possible.
I
No,
do,
that's
I
impossible.
do.
If you talk about levels of obnoxious, it's just
yeah, I have Tim.
toe to
Wal-
toe.
I have Tim Walz derangement syndrome. Guilty as
Yeah,
charged.
you must.
I cannot stand him. Yeah, nice. It's actually that's a rebuttal to anyone out there who thinks I've been accused of this, that I always dislike the female political people more than males. I've been accused of this.
Oh.
Here's a clear case where I prefer Amy Klobuchar to Tim Walz.
You're not allowed to say anything about any women candidates. You're not allowed to say.
I'm not allowed to say anything. I'll
You're not allowed
just
to
keep
say
my mouth
anything.
shut.
Yes.
I'll stay in the kitchen.
Lindsey, what's in your lens?
We're talking about Georgia. When you hear the word FBI raid and elections facility in the same sentence, it immediately hits a nerve in this country. Because for years now, the lie that the 2020 election was stolen has been used like a match near dry grass. And now investigators with the Federal Bureau of Investigations have raided an elections facility in Atlanta, searching for materials related to the 2020 election. This happened at the Fulton County Election Hub in Union City, a place that has been at the center of election denial. Claims and part of that sweeping Georgia case against President Trump that ultimately fell apart and was dropped. But let's be clear about what's happening here. This isn't about election integrity. This is about obsession. An obsession with the fact that President Trump lost the race and a refusal to move on. Because the truth is, the 2020 election, guys, was just not stolen. President Joe Biden won. States certified the results. Congress accepted the results. Biden was inaugurated in January 2021. Election security officials, including Republicans and people in Trump's own administration, said the election was secure. And when fraud happened, it was isolated and did not change the outcome. In 4 years, Trump and his allies have produced no evidence of widespread fraud. And we cannot forget what this looked like in real time. There was that hour-long call on January 2nd, 2020, with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, first reported by the Washington Post, where Trump recycled debunked claims about dead voters, ineligible voters, mystery ballots, rigged machines, and still, Raffensperger insisted Georgia's election was fair and accurate. And then days later, Gabriel Sterling, a Republican and Georgia's voting system implementation manager, publicly batted down multiple false claims. And in that Raffensperger phone call, Trump asked him to find 11,780 votes, the exact number he needed to win the state. Prosecutors allege that Trump's team was planning to submit a slate of electors to try to give Trump the victory, while also pushing access to voting machine data. So when we see the FBI show up now with a court order to seize physical ballots, ballot images, and voter rolls from Fulton County's 2020 election, I think a lot of Americans are asking the same question. Why are we still here?
What should particularly concern us is, guess who showed up at this FBI raid? Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard has nothing to do with election security. Tulsi Gabbard has even been in charge of dismantling what was called the Foreign Malign Influence Center to try to make sure foreign countries don't interfere in our elections. This complete Trump loyalist somehow popping up on an FBI raid? What the heck was she doing?
And even beyond the raid itself, it's the pattern that stands out. This comes after the DOJ issued a complaint against Fulton County in December over 2020 election information. And it comes after the DOJ attempts to investigate Trump's perceived political enemies, including New York Attorney General Letitia James and former FBI Director James Comey, cases that were dismissed after a judge ruled Trump's handpicked prosecutor was unlawfully appointed. U.S. Senator John Ossoff responded and didn't mince words. Quote, after losing Georgia in 2020, Donald Trump demanded state officials find votes to change the outcome, tried to use DOJ to overturn it, and spread conspiracy theories that led to the January 6th sacking of the U.S. Capitol. He went on, quote, I suspect today's raid is a continuation of this sore loser's crusade, despite repeated audits and independent reviews confirming that Donald Trump was indeed defeated. Now, Georgia Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock also released a statement saying, quote, the FBI should be focused on going after violent criminals, not carrying out political errands for a vengeful president. Republicans and Democrats agree the 2020 elections were accurate and secure. End of story. And that's really the bottom line. The country cannot keep relitigating an election that was decided, certified, reviewed, and confirmed. Look, people can be mad about losing. That's politics. But we can't keep rewriting reality every time someone doesn't like the outcome.
All right, so let's get into this. There were some things related to the Fulton County, specifically their tabulations and ballots, that were concerning, and I do think deserve and warrant an investigation. There were 6 individuals who were working on the polls who signed affidavits claiming that they witnessed malpractice in the counting of the ballots, and there was a court order demanding Fulton County turn over some of that data to election integrity groups. They never did. And just recently, last year, we found out that there were over 300,000 ballots that did not have poll worker signatures on them, as is required by state law. So I think, you know, if the DOJ is able to get access to this and at least provide some assurance to a lot of people who do have concerns about what happened in the Fulton County process, even if it doesn't come out in Trump's favor, I think that would go a long way to people actually having greater trust in the system.
Yeah, I think people can say we don't trust local officials, but I also then think that the rebuttal to that is that local officials or people in Georgia or the American public may look at the administration and say, well, why should we trust now the FBI that raided and took these documents to bring them back exactly as is, to not change anything, to bring everything back in its original form? And that's some of the concern of the people that are even neutrally in this. Like, you guys are just taking all of the information and now we don't know, like, what is the order of oversight involved in this to make sure that everything returns in its exact form, or we just have to take the federal government's word for it. And I think even recently it's more prevalent because of the response in Minnesota, which we're going to talk about and have been talking about for weeks. But we know that the federal government sometimes jumps to conclusions or tries to make their point quickly because it benefits them. That's happened. That's been an example for us most prevalently recently. So I think that that's the concern, is like, why are we relitigating this? Like you said, even if it's not in Trump's favor, if Democrats and several Republicans, maybe they're not saying it now, but said it privately or said it right after January 6th that this election was certified, why are funds and timing going here, trying to nitpick and find something in this county? And I've been critical of Fani Willis, just to be clear about the full case. I'm on record going off about the fact that that ball was dropped in hiring your boyfriend and everything that happened. But also, you know, Trump's prosecutor got let go while Letitia James is not getting prosecuted. So everybody is making these mistakes of putting the wrong people in wrong positions. But I just think that we need to focus at hand. Like, Trump lost the election, and that's just a fact. And I think the fact that we are continuously talking about January 6th and seeing what happened, and people are still believing that the election was stolen, that's the bigger problem to me.
I guess there were verified instances, though, in the 2020 election of issues with chain of custody for the ballots, issues with ballots being certified past the election date that was supposed to be allowed by law, state law. There were issues with individual poll workers signing affidavits in multiple states saying that the process wasn't done correctly. And the reason why we didn't really get closure on this, in my opinion, is because a lot of pretty much all of the lawsuits that Trump's team brought weren't dismissed because the investigation or a recount found that the claims were inaccurate, but they were thrown out for process-based reasons. So we never really did have an audit of the election, and that's why I think there's these lingering questions about what exactly happened.
So what happens if we put this to bed in Georgia? If it's like Trump lost and we went through these ballots, are we going to remove the January 6th website that just went up that says that he still lost the election from the administration? Is Trump going to come out and say, I lost? Like, I just can't see that even happening, but he needs to quell the worries of people.
That's kind of irrelevant to me. I mean, I just personally think a lot of people that I've talked to who felt like things were not on the up and up outside of the Trump administration would have a lot greater confidence if they were able to actually see the data.